let's talk about the crazy-ass fight on this card. Jeez Louise. Dustin Poirier submits Michael Chandler in the third round, but now without a little bit of controversy, including some potential cheating controversy, which I want to get to. But first, AB, the first question to ask you is the following. What did Dustin Poirier prove with this win?
He proved what he always proves. He just does not go away. You have to put him out if you want to beat him, because down the stretch, he will always be the better fighter. And, watching the fight backstage, Chandler's nailing him with big shots in the first, and I'm saying to the people next to me, I go, Poirier's got him right where he wants him. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, Chandler's pouring it on him right now. This fight could end at any second. I'm like, no. This is what Dustin Poirier wants. He wants Chandler to put all of his eggs in one basket, throw the kitchen sink at him early on, because down the stretch, he's going to be able to, for him, this was sprint versus marathon. That's exactly what this was. This was a sprint for Michael Chandler. Get this guy out of there by any means possible early on, and if not, you're going to lose this fight. And that's what happened. I mean, at the end of the first round, when Chandler's gas tank started to dwindle, Poirier poured it on him and stole that round with those big strikes to end it. Second round, Chandler does things smart, takes him down, wins the round by controlling him, is able to catch his breath. And then by the third round, he wasn't able to catch enough breath, and Dustin Poirier is a builder. He might be one of the best builders in the history of MMA, because as the fight goes on, he solves the puzzle, and then he is able to best you and put it on you in ways that are very, very violent and very, very determined. And that's what he did on Saturday, and that's what he will continue to do for as long as you allow him to be in a fight. Because I don't think we're going to see Dustin Poirier lose a decision unless it's against a guy like Islam who wrestles him. Because as the fight goes on, his power never seems to go away. He seems to be able to maintain his cardio, and his will just continues to grow and grow as the fight goes on.
Yeah, this was everything we wanted it to be, and I think more. I think it actually exceeded the wild expectations that this fight had coming in, where we're like, okay, give it a round and a half, it'll be an incredible brawl, and then somebody's going down. God, there were like 17 near finishes. It's like Steamboat versus Savage here. You know what I'm saying here? In that regard, I felt it was going to be over at so many different points. So the stakes for this changed in a weird way coming in. With the Alexander Volkanovski announcement, 24 hours before, to get the next lightweight title shot. So I want to ask you a two-part question on if that hadn't happened, if that fight hadn't been announced, if it was still wide open, would we be talking about Dustin Poirier getting a third full crack at this lightweight title after this exact performance? And on that flip side, if it is going to be Volkanovski next, what did Poirier secure beyond respect and another great name on his resume?
Poirier was able to remind everybody what he's made of, and that he is a championship caliber fighter. One fight does not make a career, and that loss to Charles Oliveira when Charles Oliveira was on fire, I think that is something that Dustin Poirier, coming off of 2 Conor fights, might not have been prepared for at the time. But right now, you look at this kind of a performance, and it just reminds you just how good Dustin Poirier is. And on the flip side, my colleague Robin Black at TSN raised a very good point about Michael Chandler. Like, Michael Chandler is not making the best decisions in there because he wants to put on a show. He wants to perform. And it's worked out for him great from a lucrative standpoint. He's making a lot of money. He's getting bonuses. He just extended his contract with the UFC, got a new contract rather. And he's fighting to entertain. And I think for Michael Chandler, that'll do really well for his bank account. But he makes a lot of mistakes along the way as a result of that. And he's run into 3 elite fighters in Gaethje, Oliveira, and now Poirier, where had he fought a little bit smarter, maybe been a little bit more calculated in his decisions rather than trying to put on a show, maybe he would have won some of those fights. So I think that the success of Dustin Poirier also is a symptom of Michael Chandler perhaps not having the best game plan in these fights and not thinking long term in terms of how the fight is going to play out, and really trying to gas pedal a lot of these opponents. And Dustin Poirier is absolutely the wrong fighter to gas pedal, because down the stretch he will outrun you.
I don't know, Luke. I want to argue that. And you brought up a good idea, Luke, about Chandler potentially trying to take some of that energy and focusing it more in one strategic area, which isn't too different from what AB's trying to present here. But I just look at Chandler at 36, coming over from Bellator. Even though Eddie Alvarez had made that same conversion, we did remember the Will Brooks story where, it wasn't going to be automatic, but I think he took all of his abilities that were left in elite and rolled them into one giant punch. And is it reckless? Yes. But he was that close to winning the damn lightweight title. And in his mid to late 30s, in this killer top 10 of great old names going out and new ones coming in. I could almost argue that this is the best use of his powers, as reckless as it is, and it can cause big mistakes, but he also can break people. That barrage of punches he put on in the second half of round 1 before, as you mentioned, it looked like he started to gas. If you don't have the chin and ability of Poirier right there, you're probably getting knocked out. And that's what he does. And financially rewarding, but he may also get Conor next for all we know. So, I wonder if had he gone the other way and fought as straight up, I mean, he's given up size in a lot of these matchups too, against the elite lightweights. I mean, his record may end up being the exact same. So instead he did it his way, had fun, lived a rock star lifestyle, and cashed big checks. And because of how reckless he is, it's going to help the aging process because we're never going to know exactly what he has left. Does that make any sense? Or am I just trying to mimic my career after his attitude here? Because I'm about entertainment too, Luke, okay?
AB, here's where I'm at on this one. I think I'd split the difference a little bit. My view on it is in the 3 fights that he lost, if he had fought a little bit more strategically, I think he probably could have won at most one of those more. So, do I think the results would be different? And again, I mean, I'm just making this up. I don't have evidence to prove it, but it's sort of my sense of things that had he tailored his fighting strategies a little bit more in line with a coordinated strategic vision of things, could he have gotten another win, maybe even 2? It's possible. I don't think he would have gotten the 2, but I do think he would have gotten at least one of them. But the reality is, to BC's point, it's not a major trade-off in wins losses. I mean, 3 or 2 and 3 doesn't look great, but it would, with 3 and 2 is not significantly better. And more to the point, he has made himself such an attraction to the fans and to potential opponents down the line by virtue of how much this buzz is created in the way in which he's come over and fought. So I get that there could be more wins on the ledger, but it's hard for me to believe he'd be quite the sensation and then setting himself up for other things in the way had he fought a more strategic version of things. In other words, I'm not going to say it's all a wash. I actually think he probably made the right call in the end to do what he's doing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't argue the other way on that. I think that if he ends up getting the Conor fight, because right now I think he's by far the most attractive option there, then him fighting for bank account is going to pay off. He might not be the champion of the UFC, but if he gets a fight with Conor, I think that he would probably prefer that to becoming a UFC champion. I think that would be a massive attraction fight. I think, honestly, when Conor is ready to come back, I think they're going to present him with 2 options. Do you want Tony Ferguson or do you want Michael Chandler? And I think those are going to be the 2 possibilities for Conor in his return. And I think Chandler is probably has the early lead in that regard. So if that's what Chandler, when Chandler came to the UFC, he said, "I'm here for a good time, not a long time." And that has proven to be very, very true.
Well, AB, quickly on this, because I was so enthralled and entertained, and we knew these guys would do this. Of this lightweight era of action heroes, which is Poirier, Chandler, Eddie Alvarez was in there, Gaethje still making them great, Tony, Conor, I mean, all those guys kind of fought each other the best they could. Where does this Saturday's Chandler versus Poirier, in your eyes, rank in terms of the best action fights those guys have produced?
It's up there, but I actually think Chandler versus Alvarez was probably, those 2 fights were probably better than that one this past weekend. And you hate to use recency bias because that was such a great fight, but I think Gaethje versus Alvarez was better. I think Gaethje versus Poirier was better. Gaethje versus Chandler may have even been better. Gaethje is really producing the best results of the bunch in terms of these action fights. If you look at what he's been able to produce since coming to the UFC, I mean, that guy's just never in boring fights. So if I were to give an award for best action star, if I was handing out the Oscar for that, the action hero would be Justin Gaethje. I think that his fights are just always entertaining. And I mean, hey, look at Michael Chandler also. He hasn't produced a dud yet either. So I think that's
interesting because
Gaethje's been in the best ones, though.
Gaethje has tried his best to tailor his caveman crazy style and make it a little bit more, title contending. And maybe that took a little bit off of his, I'm just going to go out there to make the kind of shit that Chandler's making purposely every single time. But to your point, Gaethje might have been in the better ones overall in this stretch. I mean, Gaethje versus Eddie, Gaethje versus Poirier. I mean, they've just been, we've been spoiled. We've been spoiled across the board. Luke, you don't like to rank action fights, but they're awesome. Okay.
Well, I got to say, I think I agree with AB that Gaethje has been probably the greatest catalyst for exciting fights. But fucking Chandler's knockout of Ferguson is, wow. That's up there with one of the best knockouts I've ever fucking seen. You know what I mean? So the overall body of work probably goes to Gaethje, but that individual piece of brilliance would go to Chandler in terms of like guys coming over to UFC from other organizations. A couple more points on this fight I want to get to with you, AB. Number one, the fish hooking allegation. Now, there's a video that came out. I don't like to accuse fighters of cheating unless we have like NFL rules. Incontrovertible evidence. I don't know that we have incontrovertible evidence, but there is a very slowed down piece of video where you can see he doesn't quite have the choking arm, and then he lifts his hand like this and pulls and then slides. It's hard to know exactly what really went in his mouth or what Michael Chandler knew he was pulling. It's a little hard to say, but it doesn't look great for Chandler. What do you make of this?
Oh my God, cheating in MMA. Ooh, this never happens, does it? Hey, it's the referee's job. Stand them up. Take a point. I mean, we see this all the time. People are making a big deal of this. Yeah, it's dirty. But I mean, do we see dirty stuff in MMA all the time? Do we see cage grabs? Do we see people grabbing the gloves? It looks a lot dirtier. I mean, that's the thing. Optically, it's a lot more visceral to see somebody stuff their hand in someone's mouth and lift their mouth up. But again, the referee's got to be on top of the action there and do something about it. Otherwise, we're just going to keep seeing cheating and fouls that don't get called. And it's hard also because taking a point away it has such a profound effect on a 3-round fight that the referees often won't do it. But at least take away position or do something that's going to penalize a fighter for doing something like that. And I know Dustin Poirier was furious about it. In fact, there was also a clash of heads in the first round that a lot of people didn't see that rocked Dustin Poirier. Like that was really the catalyst for that big barrage that Michael Chandler was able to land. I actually told Poirier when I interviewed him afterwards, I go, that was like a clash of heads. He goes, oh, I knew it. He goes, I blacked out. Didn't see anything coming. And it just, in the first round, that was one of the things that, and the referee kind of missed it. He probably could have called the timeout and let Dustin Poirier recover. But, obviously the referee's going to have the angle that they're going to have. And these things happen at such a blink of an eye that oftentimes you won't catch it. But again, it's one of those situations where I think a lot of people are making more of it than they normally would, some sort of foul that is committed during a fight that doesn't really have anything happen as a result of it.
Well, AB, I think they're making it...
Fish hooking fouls are gross as shit, though. Like, of all time gross fouls, that's gross as fuck.
Okay, well, you guys are both missing...
That's why people pay more attention to it.
Sorry to interrupt your conversation, guys, but you're both missing a big part of this equation, which is why the fans were so grossed out and also why Poirier was so pissed. Is we've seen before when the fighter on top is bleeding, as Chandler was, that they sort of try to angle the dripping of their blood to fall in the face of their opponent to blind him. We've seen that before. But Chandler, according to Poirier, and we've got video and have you seen the shit that might prove it, Chandler was shooting bloody snot rockets, like aiming them at Poirier's face while trying to land ground and pound. That's next level grimy to me. That goes beyond holding the gloves or grabbing the fence. Would you agree that that's enough to A, justify how pissed Poirier was, but B, like, we do have to say, did Chandler go, like, morally a little bit too far here with that grossness?
I took a refereeing course, and snot rockets are not one of the fouls that are illegal in MMA. So snot rockets are fair game in terms of MMA. Now, of course, if he's fish hooking him and holding his mouth open to shoot snot rockets into his nose, that's where the foul. That's where the foul.
I don't know.
This really is a stupid show. I really have to just say that out loud here. We're talking about shooting boogers in each other's mouths.
But I think there is a line. I think that does cross to me. Well, you know what I mean? Like, that does cross to me a line of what's acceptable. I'd be pissed if I was Poirier. I'd go right for the nuts if I was him. I would have gone right after.
Poirier did, and he wanted to knock him out in the third.
Dude, Poirier tried to open his cut with two hands. This was after
you can't do that.
Chandler shot snot rockets at him.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't do that shit. All right, last question on this, and we'll move on to something else in the card. Beneil Dariush. Now, I had him, I interviewed him. He just is not interested at all in calling anyone out. But geez, Louise, man. Aaron, you know this as well as I do. That guy has earned himself something. What does the UFC do with Beneil Dariush? And here's the caveat, if they're trying to do right by him.
Easy answer. You book him against Dustin Poirier. I think that's the fight to make, and I think that would figure out the rightful number one contender in this division.